Greetings and welcome to a multi-dimensional episode of Genre Grinder. I am your host, Gabe, and with me today is returning guest and my good friend, Betsy.
Hello!
Today we're going to talk about what I'm calling Blank in Wonderland Movies, which is a reference to a bunch of movies that reminded me personally of Alice in Wonderland. And this was another one of those genres that like years ago when I thought up this idea, I wrote down on a piece of paper, or didn't write it on physical paper. I wrote down in a note on a computer saying things to do. It's like a big favorite of mine. I think that that's my favorite Disney, well, one of my top 3 favorite Disney cartoons. And I always loved The Wizard of Oz. Betsy and I already talked about this a little bit on our kids horror movie episode, because we talked about Paper House, which is definitely a version of. And
it would have been even better if, when you opened up that document, a door opened in your office, and then you were whisked away to a magical land in which you found the rest of the idea for this episode.
In which I am the most
thematic.
In which I am the most important person alive.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, when I was talking with you about this, you referred to them as Portal movies.
Yeah, Portal Fantasy, usually.
Portal Fantasy. The only reason I'm not going with that is because I think that it will be confused as movies about the video game Portal in, like, you know, when people do web searches. I don't remember what the term is for that. So we're going to go with
search engine optimization.
SEO. Yeah, my SEO would be all video game people going, what the fuck? Because I've never played the Portal games. They're first person. I get nauseous.
GLaDOS isn't in this podcast. Fake.
Yeah.
Fake
lame.
Lies. Lame. Yeah.
From what I know about those games, already on a tangent, but from what I know about those games, they wouldn't count for what we're talking about today.
Okay, I could make a very good argument that they kind of are, at least in the Isekai reference, but
yeah.
we aren't a video game podcast.
No.
I'm not going to show my entire ass here, and somebody will come after me, and I don't need that. I don't need that heat in my life.
That's actually my next note, is that you reminded me, and this is a term I only learned maybe this year, an Isekai is a term tied to Japanese comics and animation, video games, other fantasies, that really fits this. And I didn't know that until I started watching. I don't remember his name, or else I would hype him up. But there's a certain YouTube channel I watch. And since I don't know anime, but I enjoy it, I like watching people talk about the tropes of it. And Isekai kept on coming up. And I finally just had to, because this person obviously thought his audience knew what that meant. So I had just Googled that term maybe a couple months before you brought it up, so that was new to me too.
I think Isekai is definitely having a renaissance, because one might say people would really like an escapism from things that are going on. And so the idea of being able to escape one's responsibilities and everyday normal life is very appealing. And while I think we will find in the movies that we have watched and have selected, Isekai, I think, definitely has a slightly different flavor, in that while there is definitely like a whole different world out there, there tends to be a little bit more trauma. Anyway,
the couple I've watched that were considered isekai shows are usually often half satire of the idea.
Yes, I think so. I think we are definitely getting into a lot of post genre.
Yes, and I think
in a lot of ways. Yeah,
I think that the movies that I like, and stories that I like that remind me of this are a little more precious about it, usually a little less ironic about the idea. And so I think the isekai counts, but is also its own thing, is the way we can put it. And since I'm not an anime, and I probably will never do an anime episode just because it's such a complex, rich, and it's a thing out of my league, that's probably how further we'll go with that. Though we are going to talk about at least one anime, which actually brings me to I'm just going to give some examples of, like, so people understand what we're talking about. Alice in Wonderland, she goes down the rabbit hole into another world where things don't really make sense, and she has to find her way back, but she also has all these things happen that are metaphors for whatever you want them to be metaphors for. Usually, we were talking about when we were watching these movies the other day, we were talking about how usually the metaphor is adolescence into adulthood type stuff, but there's all sorts of essays about how Alice in Wonderland's really about colonialism or Victorian attitudes or whatever.
Or math,
Yeah.
or any number of other things. Yeah.
And,
What the interpretation of X story, you could find any number of things, but Alice in Wonderland specifically, yes, has a lot of various interpretations. Yeah.
and so then you get movies like Pan's Labyrinth, which we're not going to really talk about because there was a lot of movies I decided were too popular, and Pan's Labyrinth being one of them. But Pan's Labyrinth adds the whole escaping fascism part,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and brings out the horror of it, which there is a lot of horror in these kinds of. These are a lot of these. The reason we've already covered them when we talked about Paper House, and then the other movie we already talked about on a separate podcast was Return to Oz, which is like my childhood trauma movie. There's something about the structure of these stories that makes it so that kids can deal with, like you said, trauma and horror, and so I think it's a gateway drug for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the like really classic movies in this is Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
Um in much the same way as like it's a gateway movie to like dealing with trauma, but also kind of horror and adventure for a lot of kids. And it is very much the Alice in Wonderland-esque slash Portal fantasy of going into another world and being that hero, and also being that transition between adolescence and adulthood, and having kind of an adventure, dealing with metaphor, also David Bowie,
Mm-hmm.
and coming out the other side changed and learning lessons kind
And
of
I mean,
thing.
that was another one where, of course, I mean, that's a movie we watched anytime there was a rainy day at school. I guess our school just had a copy of it. So that's a huge movie for me in my childhood, along
Yeah.
with the Disney Alice in Wonderland and the original Wizard of Oz. I wasn't, I just have a short list, and so people aren't saying, why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about that? Obviously, Chronicles of Narnia is a big one that is next to Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz, kind of like a sort of ground zero for a lot of these stories with people of a certain age, and that kind of last generations, and people want to retell them over and over again. You have something like The Neverending Story, which kind of came out around the same time as Return to Oz and was a much bigger hit. I have technically the movie, there's like different versions. Technically, the movies Stargate and Army of Darkness are a sort of horror sci-fi variations on this for adults rather than children. And then Enchanted is a sort of reversal where someone comes from the fantasy realm into the real world, which I'm sure other things have done before, and I'm just not thinking of them right now. And then there are two, one popular, one not so popular versions in Coraline and Mirror Mask, but due to recent events and because they're too popular, really, we're just going to
Hmm.
skip over them and not talk about those. There was a point
Yeah.
when we were going to include them and no longer.
Yeah.
But maybe for the youngest view, if I have like 10-year-old viewers, listeners, Super Mario Brothers and Barbie are both these movies. I guess Barbie's a good example of a reversal like Enchanted.
Hmm.
And then Super Mario Brothers is 100% what we're going for here. The animated, actually, both of them, both the animated one and the old '90s one.
Yeah. The old 90s one is actually a really interesting uh example of this, because it does do the very like gritty real world to grittier fantasy world, and turns a lot of things on its head. But since it's such a weird movie, like exactly how the portal of the Portal fantasy like ends up changing things,
Mm-hmm.
especially with how you expect. Anyway, I love the old Mario Brothers
Well, it's
movies, but
almost yeah, they almost over explain it, and
they
I
really
think in a certain
do.
way. I think that I mean I
Totally
think of the
weird.
new movie as cute and kind of like a long commercial, but I do appreciate that they just don't explain a lot of it. I think that
Yeah,
that's a better way to do it.
it
Like the
really is.
old cartoon when we were kids. I don't know if you ever watched the
Oh, I
Mario Super
did.
Show. Yeah, yeah.
I
So,
did. Do the Mario indeed.
yep. And then the other really big one that's maybe one of my all-time favorite movies is Spirited Away. We're not going to cover that. We found because Totoro is also one of these. We found the least popular Studio Ghibli version of this to cover, and
Yep.
that was my decision. So people can blame me, but I don't think a lot of people have talked about that movie. So I think we're going to kind of set up the rules of this as we're going along. Is the idea? I don't need to. I think people know what Alice in Wonderland is, and I don't think I need to be. We I tried to be strict on things. These aren't just about people going to another dimension or time travel's another one where some time travel movies fit, but a lot of them are kind of their own thing. So someday maybe I'll do a separate time travel episode. I don't know. There's a lot of movies there.
Yeah,
Moving on.
like time travel that's Portal fantasy is much more like Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court
Right,
time travel,
which is what Army of
which
Darkness is.
yeah, and that is like the Portal fantasy version of time travel.
Hmm.
The other time travel is look at how clever I am with a spreadsheet.
Hmm.
And that's a different kind, and it's totally fine. There are at least two different kinds of time travel movies.
Yeah,
And if we wanted to pull that onion apart and make that kind of soup, we'd be doing a different episode. We're not doing that.
yeah.
Anyway.
So then, the first movie was one I demanded we do, and which Betsy rightfully wasn't entirely sure fit what we're doing here. But it's a movie
Yeah.
I've wanted to cover, and I couldn't find any other reason to cover it. And there's a twist that we'll cover at the end why it fits better. But that movie is Zoo, the Warriors from the Magic Mountain. I've seen it written as Zoo Warriors of the Magic Mountain. And this is directed by Tsui Hark. And I'm going to read off the letterbox synopsis here because the story is basically it's based on a book called a 1932 book by, and I'm gonna fuck up this name, but Huan Shu Lu Shu, and that book is called The Legends of the Swordsman and the Mountains of Shu, and that's series of stories. So this is cramming a whole bunch of stories into one thing. So the as Letterbox says it, in the 5th century, constant civil war scars Western China. To escape death, T, a young scout, jumps through a crevice into the Zoo Mountains, where he gets entangled in a great battle against the Blood Demon, a supernatural entity seeking to wreak havoc upon the world. Which, yeah, that's kind of what happens. That's a good enough
Yeah,
description.
sure. Yeah. I mean,
So
I that did happen.
that those are things that happened in the film. So I'm gonna kind of info dump here for just a minute, and before we get into it, this is one of my favorite movies, and it really changed the course of me as a movie fan. I first learned about it from an episode of Jonathan Ross's The Incredibly Strange Film Show, and most people will know Jonathan Ross as the aging but still pretty funny, occasionally transphobic British comedian with a lisp. And he had this TV show that was it was about cult films. It was a documentary series, and it ended up on Discovery Channel back when Discovery Channel had no original programming. So I used to watch. I just stumbled upon this, watched every episode. There was a whole episode devoted to Chewie Hark, and it got me interested in this and Chinese Ghost Story, which we talked about in the Monster Fuckers episode, which was a slightly more successful movie and a little bit more in line with what I guess the best thing we can call these is Jiangqi fiction, named after the hopping vampires, which are not in this movie. That kind of thing was sort of solidified with Chinese Ghost Story. But this is a movie that was important because it was big budget, and Hark or Chewy, sorry, I'm messing up surnames here. Tsui had connections in America. He was educated in America, so he actually brought on American studio effects artists, including some of the guys who worked on the original Star Wars, which then became a big part of this film's advertising. And so he had this level of money and talent that made it kind of unfair to compare this to other movies of its time. But at the same time, it really becomes a 90% special effects movie, which I can understand people being frustrated by. But to me, that's kind of the fun. But the other thing that I would say is that I was already primed to like this movie because when I was much younger, my father rented John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China, which was directly inspired by this. So the reason why Betsy rightfully thinks this might not be, I mean, from that description, a guy does go into a portal, and but the
Oh,
the
okay.
yeah,
You're setting me up to be like a big hater.
no,
But
no, no,
when we first started watching this, it just starts fighting.
yeah,
Like from that description, like when you first start watching this, it just starts in the middle of a battle.
mm-hmm.
And so they're fighting and everything. And so like it's it's not a bad movie. And okay, well it's a corny movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with a corny movie. I love a good corny movie. And it's very over the top. They're very like, you know, color color coded fighting. It's funny. It's a
Yeah, I
little
want to
hard to
say
follow in some parts, but like fine.
I think it's important to note when movies are supposed to be comedies because I think of foreign films sometimes that gets lost in translation and people think they're laughing at a movie instead of with it. This movie is very much a comedy. It's a fantasy and it has some dramatic moments and it has a lot of action, but it's like almost 70% comedy. Like they're taking the piss a lot and making googly. I mean, it's really it would. I guess this one I feel like it would be hard to not recognize that it was supposed to be funny, but I could see it happening.
It is one of those that like they are very self-serious roles
Mm-hmm.
in like Chinese mythology, but they are also like the first part of it, like they've color coded the army. Okay, I feel like I should take a step back before I say self-serious roles in Chinese mythology. The first part is armies fighting each other that have color coded,
It
but then
yeah,
they switch the colors back and forth and are kind of doing a commentary on uh how war is just kind of meaningless.
yeah.
And then it switches over to like the more fantastical uh magic fighting sort of Chinese, like Chinese ghost story type.
The mythology element of it.
Yeah, with the magic Buddhists and the demon fighters and the blood demons and everybody flying around on swords
Mm-hmm.
and doing that kind of thing. And also being very noble and having slightly ridiculous names of being a virtue. And that's the part where you're never quite sure if something's funny or cultural, and that's where it's harder to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still being pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty fun. But at that point, that was where I was like, I'm not sure if this is actually Portal Fantasy or if this is just these kind of movies, because this is just very Chinese mythology.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Well,
just somebody training to be an apprentice. I don't think this is Portal Fantasy. I don't think this is an Alice in Wonderland story,
and
Gabe. I think you didn't know this entire genre of story.
and in your defense, it what you're talking about the early battle scenes being so like satirical and color coded is that it already kind of feels like a fantasy movie at that point because it
Yeah.
the quote real world of I spoil the thing we're going to talk about later. This is the initial release cut of the film,
Mm-hmm.
and in this original release cut, the real world is battle scarred, but also very silly. And so he definitely goes into a different world, and he learns different rules, and he becomes a sort of kind of like a lot of these become the hero's journey. It's going to come up a lot in the next one. And he kind of like stumbles in. Something I enjoy about it is how much he stumbles into the hero's journey. But unlike Alice, who just sort of goes with the flow and is very confused by everything, and that's I love that about the Disney movie, is that she's sort of dry about everything. I just think that's very funny. But he's like really into this. He wants to do something that makes a difference, and that's a different kind of portal hero, I think, which again makes it seem like it makes the whole becoming an apprentice thing seem a little more, because he's actively pursuing it. It's more just about a guy learning how to fight in this land, rather than learning how to fight the embodiment of war that is about to, like, guys, I think the idea is the blood demon, if the blood demon comes to the fore, he will make these wars even worse, and he is the embodiment of man's evil, is the way I've always read it. That was my reading on it, and that was why I always thought of it as, or maybe why I tried to cram it in the Portal Fantasy idea here.
I
uh
I mean, I can understand the whole, like, if something like this was happening in in World War One, and then like, ended up finding King Arthur and Merlin,
yeah,
and, like, wanted to be part of the Holy Grail fight to bring,
I mean,
everybody Jesus kind of thing.
that's sort of
Like,
what Lion
I
the Rich
could
and the Wardrobe is.
it
And so I
absolutely is not in any way, but,
well,
um
Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe is World War II, and the kids escaping World War II, and then having their,
but they
hero's
don't
journey.
bring Aslan onto the battlefield.
Don't they at the end? Doesn't Aslan come on
No.
the battlefield?
No, it is they bring about the apocalypse. That's what the final we are not talking about Narnia here.
I see
We
what you're saying.
cannot talk about Narnia.
Anyway,
It is a
I think that the war
quadrillion.
aspect and the fact that there's a war going on in Narnia, that was part of my mindset too. Is
And
that
it's totally fine.
this is
Like,
just a way more ancient war. That to your point, the reason I then sort of tried to turn you around on this is that the English language edit, which Chewy Hark,
admittedly, yes, the English language edit redeemed you.
yeah, which Chewy Hark prefers this cut, and he's wrong. It's a
He
much
is.
worse movie. But there is a version of this. What is the title? I'm trying to remember what they called this version. Zoo Fighters or something like that. There's a version of this that has, I remembered it being about 5 minutes, but it's actually almost 20 minutes of the T character, who is played by Yuen Biao, who is one of the seven little fortunes. I should mention that, along with Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung. Sammo Hung plays two roles in this, and I think he was one of the choreographers too. Yuen Biao plays like a college student who is taking fencing lessons in what they're pretending is America, but they are not disguising that it is clearly Hong Kong at every turn. And he gets visited by this like girl of his dreams, who is like his version of the White Rabbit, who they try to tie in this adventure where he ends up in this realm where there are wars. And then the reason why it hurt my version of it is that in this longer cut, the portal takes him back in time to wars, and then there's the whole thing. So apparently those color-coded wars are part of the portal, and so if I'm making you count this, I have to agree that that it didn't work the first time around.
Yeah, it was one of those that, like, if the portal framing device had actually cut out the, like, first bit, that was funny, which I loved,
Mm-hmm.
then I would be like, okay, maybe he just didn't think that worked.
Yeah.
But no, the other thing is, they added 20 minutes of this weird portal framing device, but the American cut is still the same length.
Yeah.
So somehow they cut out 20 minutes of this movie. We did not watch the full
No,
20. We did not watch the full American version to
but
see
but
what they cut out.
we did cut to the end, and it ends identically. It doesn't end
Yeah,
with, it ends basically identically, which is, yeah. So it was a pretty slapdash thing. They should shoot a lot of stuff, but they did not put a lot of effort into the edit. Is, I guess, what I would say.
which probably meant they cut out more of the villain, who was the best part of that movie.
Yeah.
The main villain. We all know I can't remember a name to save my life. So, the Temperance?
Yeah, Temperance, who is played by Adam Chang, who is a hero who then gets possessed by
Villainized.
evil.
Yeah,
Hold on a sec.
Temperance
Hold on a sec.
by
What?
far.
What, Christine?
They didn't end the same. The English one ended with him waking up out of a coma.
Christine's right. The English one did have him waking up out of a coma. I do remember this now.
Oh yeah. So
Oh,
they even changed the ending.
yeah.
They did everybody so dirty.
And the other problem is that he goes into two rabbit holes basically. So in this version, he first, like, he goes to, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's like a tarot fortune teller that you said was just bullshitting, and she just
Oh
has nothing but
yeah.
bad news. And the inciting event is a terrible car accident, which I don't think that's the first time someone's gotten in a car accident and woken up in another land. I'm sure that's happened before in a movie. But
Oh
it's
yeah,
funny.
no, that's basically like bonking somebody on the head for a little nap.
Yeah. And it's funny because then he still goes into the crevice in the cave into the demon realm. So he actually goes through two.
Oh no, he doesn't just go through the crevice in the cave. He walks through a field and changes
Oh yeah, he
clothes.
just puts on he's like, "Oh, here's some clothes. Put them on."
And then goes through the crevice in the
Yeah.
cave. Like he goes through this, he's like, "Oh, ancient clothing. I'll put these on." It's a costume change. The
Yeah.
most natural thing you do when you're in a coma.
Well, and it's funny too because in the other cut, their costumes changed magically later in the movie.
Yeah.
They don't have to change clothes. They just get magic clothes put on them. It's kind of part of the point of the end of the movie is that now they are superpowered and they get
Well,
magic
yeah.
clothes.
Yeah, the concussion weakened his powers,
Yeah.
so he needed to remember what a zipper was.
Also, the college kid has nothing in common with the scout soldier. They have
No.
no character similarities whatsoever. I mean, it was too hard to completely change it and just shooting a couple scenes. You would have had to go back on the expensive sets with the expensive special effects and shoot other scenes of him reacting to things in different ways. It was a silly idea.
Yeah. And anyway, like
Anyway, I was going to go more into what this movie kind of meant for Hong Kong action, but just understand, because someday we probably will talk about these sort of comedic action horror hybrids that came out around this time. Just know that this was a very, very important movie, and that it is mostly special effects driven, and the effects don't look expensive in the year 2024. But I think it's a difference in being over reliant on CG. And I'm not an anti CG guy. I've said this on the podcast many times, but there is something about when CG gets overused, it loses the handmade quality. Whereas in this movie, everything has a super duper handmade quality to it. And you can see everything, like it's either animated or it's things on wires, or it's like some of the wire work is so beautiful that you don't care. You can see the literal wires carrying them, or people literally painting on the frame to make electrical effects. And so there's some sort of handmade artistry to it that I still really like, even if it's sort of running the whole movie to the point where the plot is kind of secondary or tertiary at a certain point.
I mean, I would say with like the resurgence of C dramas out there.
Oh, that was the other. Yeah. You
Yeah.
brought up this term. What did you?
I
Xianji.
said, yeah, I said Wu Wei, which was not right. And
It's Shangxia.
Shangxia.
Shanxia. Yeah, Shanxia genre.
Yeah, which is basically the term for magic, like these magical stories using Chinese history, which again, like these demon fighters using magic. And there are a bunch of C dramas out there right now. You can find a bunch of them on Netflix.
Yeah.
And some K dramas as well. They are getting a huge resurgence right now, and you can find like a bunch of gorgeous ones out there with like great costumes and various things. But like Chinese Ghost Story is one that I know you've covered before, but
Mm-hmm.
in that style, which you get the kind of movies that are people going around and doing martial arts, but then you get the ones that are doing martial arts and fighting ghosts
Mm-hmm.
or fighting demons, and those are always the ones that I loved,
Yeah.
because fighting the supernatural with the power of your fists or talismans or jangly sticks were always my jam.
Yeah.
And then also being able to jump around on the clouds and kick somebody so hard their soul comes out
Yeah.
is the best.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's like a huge resurgence of that right now with like great budgets and good writing, and like if you like romance, it's not my thing, but like plenty of people do. There's a lot of that. I love the better action.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see a lot of that in older movies. I mean, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is usually like the big movie people look at for that, but that doesn't have as much of the magic and like
No.
the kicking, somebody so hard a demon falls out. This is more of that,
Yeah,
and I
and
love that.
it was funny because you said this Shia genre, and I looked it up on the Wikipedia. The first example of it in movies is Zoo Warriors of the Magic Mountain,
Hmm.
1983. So I was like, well, shit, you just stumbled right on it, and something I didn't even know, and I thought I was super smart about this movie, and so yeah, and I agree. I've actually watched. I ended up watching some of the C dramas in restaurants sometimes, and there's usually like there was one that was like a harem show in particular that I watched a bunch of episodes of that had less of the fantasy, but this brought me to my last point I have on this movie, which is Chewy Hark remade this, and it was awful, and it led to this whole goopy awful CG bland as hell, everything is supposed to be ethereal but has no character series of movies that I absolutely hate. So if listeners are looking for Zoo, don't do the Zoo Warriors from 2001. Make sure you're watching Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain from 1983. And then if you want to watch the remake and see how it doesn't work. But I think that your TV shows it works for, and then when they had bigger budget movies, they often just don't work, especially in the 2000s and 2010s. That's all I really got here.
Well, let's move on to the next one then.
All right, so then this is going to be one of two that neither of us had seen. That I was looking for something a little more obscure. The official title here is Mio Min Mio from 1987. The English
Yes.
language version was The Land of Faraway, or Mio in the Land of Faraway. It is a Swedish Soviet Norwegian co production filmed in English with English, Russian, and Scandinavian actors, then dubbed into those languages. So, something I'm used to watching these movies is like I watch a lot of spaghetti westerns where people will be actually speaking English on set, but then dubbed. So, there's this sort of uncanny quality. This has a lot of that going on. So, I can imagine that being fucking weird for some people.
I feel like even if the dubbing was fine, there would have been a lot of uncanny quality to this
Hmm.
movie, though.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm gonna try to say this director's name, and probably screw this up too, but he is a Soviet director, Vladimir Grammatikov. Oh, I think I got it. Grammatikov. And according to Letterboxd, under the watch of his unkind relatives, understatement, lonely boss, his luck changes when he is sent to the land where his real father is the king. In that country, he sets out on a quest together with his new friend, who's not really new, anyway, to destroy the evil knight Kato, or Kato, depending on who's saying the line. I stumbled across this because I was trying to find an Alice in Wonderland thing that I had never seen or heard of, and a lot of Europeans on Reddit were mentioning this film. And I did recognize the box art for the VHS release, but I had never seen it and I'd never heard anybody talk about it. And so I really liked the idea of watching something that was somebody else's The Land Before Time or Labyrinth that nobody I know ever got to experience. But there was still a lot of money behind this movie and a lot of talent behind this movie. I will preface anything else we're about to say with that it is not an enjoyable movie to watch, but I'm very happy I watched it because I think there's stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff. I mean, it was a movie. Wow,
Well, I can kind of like, so Grammatikov is seems to be a relatively important figure in early childhood entertainment in Russia from the Soviet era into pretty far into the modern era. He founded an artistic directing studio called Starlight with, it was Russian, Sweden, UK, Denmark thing. I think they are the producers of this particular film. And he was a president of the Starlight Fest, which was a international children's film festival. And he was also the creative director behind Sesame Street and several Disney re-releases in Russia.
Huh.
And he made his first movie was The Mustached Nanny in 1977, and he made a whole bunch of movies, all kid friendly, from what I can tell, between the 70s. And his last one was A Little Princess in 1997. It appears to have nothing to do with the Little Prince or with the, I can't remember the author of the
Frances Hodgson Burnett.
Yeah, Frances Hodgson
Burnett.
Frances Hodgson Burnett story. It appeared to be its own little thing. But with that in mind, the things that don't work here, a lot of it is I can say, oh yeah, because this is aimed at preschoolers. Like,
yeah, no, it's definitely a movie that is dealing with some unpleasant topics in a very low conflict way.
Yeah, the lack of conflict is a big thing throughout this entire movie. That's a lot of my notes about why I didn't like it here are like, there's no fucking conflict. The boy who's boss, but his real name's Mio, there's no consequences to anything he does. He just sort of goes along with it.
Like, it's a deeply unpleasant set of topics. Like,
yeah,
his family hates him.
Yeah, he's got a
he has
classic backstory here in that he's basically like Harry Potter. This was probably enough in Europe that I wouldn't be surprised if Rowling was not familiar with the story. It's actually, I should say, it's based on a popular Swedish children's book, Mio min Mio, which I guess means Mio, my son, which was written by Astrid Lundgren and published in 1954. Astrid Lundgren, or Lindgren, is most famous for creating Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah, Pippi Longstocking. Which, I mean, okay. I will say that there is a lot of, especially at that time, there is a lot of fiction of unwanted children.
Yes.
That have been taken in by relatives. And if you look at that time period, like children who feel unwanted or are unwanted, like, okay, feel unwanted or are unwanted, and I say that are unwanted because you have to know, in the wake of like World War I, World War II,
Yep.
because their parents are dead,
Yep.
There has been a bombing,
and some of them were sent away too.
Yeah.
And And so
Like,
maybe they're not in a permanent situation with these relatives, but there was a lot of children that were sent to live with relatives out in the country.
yeah, we go back to Narnia here.
Yes,
The entire uh pensives, pensives, depending on
I
if
think.
you've
Yeah,
heard
I
that
think it
name
was
out.
the movies. They
Pensive?
say
I don't remember.
pensives. Yeah,
Yeah, that's probably. Look, I read them,
yeah,
and I have a. If there is one thing you know about me, it is that I have the worst pronunciation of names, and Pensivi was definitely how I said it when I was a
yeah.
kid.
It sounds like a better name, but I guess it sort of sounds
It's
Italian.
probably, yeah. But pensive.
This is Gabe from the future. I looked this up. It's Pevensie, not pensive or Pevencini. Sorry about that.
They were sent to be with their uncle, because the magician's nephew.
Hmm.
Um, but and he was unkind until he was kind, and all of that like unwanted child, um, depending on how cruel they were and like how much they fed you and how much they had was a rich vein of story for many people growing up, especially in like the northern parts of Europe,
Hmm.
because things were just scarce. Being a very unpleasant topic, just kind of hovering around in the background, is something that preschoolers would be aware of, but nobody would want to talk about. And so the fact that it was there
This one is
was,
modern, quote unquote, modern for the year it came out. I think it's supposed to take place in the 80s. It's
yeah,
but
but
there's
like,
still that whole thing going on. Yeah.
yeah, but like as it's an adaptation,
Hmm.
um, like you still have some of that. And so because you have that in the adaptation, you're not really interrogating it for a preschooler. You're
Right.
like, that's there, but we're not really going to talk about it because he just doesn't have parents. And for some reason, his aunt doesn't like him. People sometimes just don't like people. Moving on.
Yeah. And he gets bullied. I mean, he has
Yeah.
of all the characters, he has every reason. The thing that actually bothers me about this movie as a Portal movie, which it absolutely 100%
Uh-huh.
is the idea that he has no lesson to learn.
No.
But I love that about most of these stories is that Spirited Away is about a lot of things, but it's also about a girl having to grow up and take responsibility for things. And this is he does take responsibility for things, but because that's what he wanted to do with his life. He's such a good child that there's nothing that needs to change. Just everybody's really mean to him for no reason. And it's like a story a child would write about themselves, and then they were mean to me and I did nothing wrong, and I'm not going to explore my actions in a different from a different point of view. It was all their fault, whereas a lot of those other stories were written by adults who are writing about their annoying children that are pissing them off.
Yeah, fair. So it's really interesting to think about whether portal fantasies, like whether going through a portal, whether the fact that you are going through the portal is to teach you something, or
Hmm.
if you need to like change to like come back through the portal.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so to take from what we've looked at for the last couple of like these two stories that we've done, and like looking at the other portal fantasies we've looked at, like, you know, Alice in the Looking Glass, the idea of the white rabbit was that she was wasting time, and so she had to like be more responsible. And part of
Hmm.
that is growing up, and part of that is whatever. And so her journey through Wonderland is her learning responsibility so that on the other side she's a more realized person, and so therefore she can be on the other side of Wonderland, more mature Alice. If we're taking this as the portal fantasy makes you a better person on the other side, it doesn't just change you in some way.
I get well, and then like Pan's Labyrinth is more about accepting the horrors of reality, I guess.
Yeah,
Which,
because she never comes back through it
yeah,
because she can't.
yeah,
Um,
and the bad guys don't win in the long run, but they win in the end of that story, basically.
yeah. One could argue, and I'm going to, that part of that is the portal for that isn't necessarily just for her. It's also for like everybody there. The
Hmm.
idea of like we are all going through that portal together to see that like she definitely never comes through the portal, but everybody in this comes through to the other side to see that fascism was a terrible idea.
Yes, and we should only
And
have it for another 30-35 years tops.
yeah, but like fascism was a terrible idea and it ruined this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And being able to show that through art like is a beautiful thing. And
Hmm.
like you can show that and like the idea of these people did lose through this movie in the long term. Um but not the and the like story of this girl, even though she doesn't get to grow old even in the movie, her mother continues on,
Hmm.
kind of thing. Anyway, we're not talking about Pan's Labyrinth in the long term because we didn't watch that movie and
Yeah,
there's only so
but
much we can do. But anyway, so like exactly who is going through what portal is definitely like things you can pick apart. But Mio
well,
is
and
so weird in this because of how it ends.
right, and so I don't want to get there just yet. I want to take it back just a
Yeah.
sec. Based on a novel by creator Pippi Longstocking. Um, the cast is kind of cool. We got
Oh
Christopher
yeah.
Lee. Christopher Lee
Christopher
is an
Lee
evil
was
sorcerer.
great in this.
He
Like
hated the experience. That's like one of the few factoids you can find, is that he had to shoot all his scenes in Moscow, and he called the food inedible, the sanitation unspeakable, and there'd be ubiquitous political people everywhere. Uh, he
I mean, I gotta say, fair play.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing
I
that's
mean,
beautiful about him. We were just on a previous podcast talking about the difference between Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, how they're close friends. They were in all these movies together. How Peter Cushing, everybody loved him. He had nothing but nice things to say about everybody. Christopher Lee hated everything he did, complained all the time, but always put in the work. Is what we came down to on that one. Then he puts in the
yeah,
work here. He's
no.
good. He's good. And I
He
bet you he knew this story because he was a huge Lord of the Rings, and he was a massive fan of Last Unicorn. So
Oh yeah.
he was I bet he knew this book. I bet he had read this book. He was a genuine fantasy nerd in a certain sense. Like read the Lord of the Rings every year. And part of the reason he's in the Last Unicorn is because he basically forced them to put him in it because it's one of his favorite books. So Christopher Lee doing a good time, having a horrible time, doing well. Timothy Bottoms plays the king. He's not particularly good. Uh, um, Susanna
no.
York is this sort of.
I
Oh, go ahead.
no, no, he's not. I mean, he's fine. It's just
I think there's a
like
language barrier. I think he is super confused by everything going on.
yeah, that's fair. Like
I think Christopher Lee doesn't have that problem because he made all those Italian and Spanish and German films. So he just like
yeah,
just does what he's
he's
gonna
like
do.
fine. Yeah, Christopher Lee, he comes on, he's like
He directs
a
himself.
revelation. Like he comes on in that scene and you're like finally some good fucking food.
Oh, a performance.
Oh, somebody's acting. Thank goodness. And it's like the last third of the movie and you're like, "Oh good. Finally." Anyway, sorry.
The
Go on.
I the well, Susanna York plays this sort of good witch who is a seamstress who makes them a Lord of the Rings cloak.
Oh yeah.
This book actually was released the same year as Fellowship of the Ring. There are a lot of things that happen in this that remind me of The Hobbit that she might have had in mind when she wrote this, but uh, there's no way that her and Tolkien were just arriving at the same stuff probably based on the same old stories. I was kind of surprised by that. I was like, when was this written? I couldn't remember when Fellowship of the Ring came out, and they came out the same year. So yeah, just sort of coincidences there. But the exciting cast member, other than, of course, Christopher Lee, is a very, very young Christian Bale, who is the secondary lead. Who I can't remember what his real world name is, but his fantasy world name is either Tum Tum or Yum Yum, depending on who's saying it.
Yeah.
I honestly couldn't tell you if it was Tum Tum or Yum Yum. What does they say? Jum Jum on Letterbox. I
Of
don't know.
course they do. It could be anything. It's so weird.
But what's cool about this is that this movie came out the same year as his big break, which was Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun, which was a very like that movie to me was like what the Goonies was to other kids my age. I watched it over and over again. I don't know why, but that movie is specifically about a kid who is separated from his parents during World War II, who is trying to journey back to them. So there's this sort of weird connection there that I was really fascinated by. He's also not great in it, but I cannot blame child like 10-year-old Christian Bale. There's a funny not well now funny in retrospect story that while they were filming this, a little thing called the Chernobyl meltdown happened.
Oh no.
Which it wasn't like they were in Moscow. They were around Moscow. That would have been in Ukraine. But it was close enough that Bale says, as childhood memory, he says they were told they had to leave. They disappeared. He didn't understand why. He was never told why, which maybe you shouldn't tell a child why. I think that would freak me out way too much as a 10-year-old. That the end of the world might happen because we spilled some stuff, but don't worry about it. But they came back in a month, and he said that he remembers there was crew members with Geiger counters the whole rest of the filming, just making
Oh
sure
wow.
that everything was safe to eat and stuff.
Oh.
But that's his only real memory of it, because I'm sure he would rather talk about Empire of the Sun.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. Oh
uh,
man.
I do like the imagination behind the way you get to Wonderland in this story. It's
The Land of Faraway,
the
you mean?
Land of Faraway, which might sound better in Swedish, I'm gonna guess. Sometimes when there's bad, like something sounds lame, you're like, I bet that sounded way cooler in its original language, and that they probably shouldn't have been so literal with the translation there. But he
I mean,
gets
it's
okay.
probably like Over the Hills and Far Away.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, The Land of Faraway isn't that bad, but like
Well, I
Over
guess
the
the original
Hills and
title
Far
is
Away.
Mio, My Son, which is not a great
Not
title.
like, yeah.
That sounds
It's it's
like literally like something like a modern set thing about a guy whose wife dies, and he has to explain it to his child and the sad adventures that
Mio,
they have.
Mio, my son.
Mio, my son, your
But
mother's dead.
like Wonderland isn't great either. We're just inured to it.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because that's yeah, exactly. So I'm sure the Land of Far Away sounds beautiful in the Swedish tongue, and then they love it. Anyway,
Yeah.
but to get there, he runs away from home because again, his aunt is so horrible, and they set up his uncle as more of a character and just drop it. I feel like that maybe the book had more with the uncle and the sort of Oz thing where there are versions of people in the Land of Far. Some of the bullies and Christian Bale's characters show up in the Land of Far Away, but that seems like it just got dropped. So he runs away from home, and there's this ethereal blonde woman who works at this corner grocery who's nice to him, who happens to be out in the middle of the night, hands him a golden apple and a special postcard which he is to mail to the king of the Land of Far Away. And he mails it, and it tells the king he's coming. The apple turns into literal gold. It reflects the gold in a random green glass bottle, which then he pops open, sort of like a genie's lamp. And a spirit of the Land of Far Away, who's just a giant talking head, appears and eventually agrees to bring him there if he'll clutch onto his beard. And so he clutches his beard and sort of like Peter Pan, which is another one of these stories we haven't brought up. Peter Pan, they fly to Never Never Land. He goes to the Land of Faraway holding for dear life on a giant floating head's beard. And it's almost Terry Gilliam-esque. And it's like one of the moments where the movie sort of comes alive for a second because it's so strange.
Yeah, like it's also Little Nemo in the
Yeah,
Land of
yeah.
Dream. And it's weird. The golden apple is also wild because I think anybody who has heard like Greek myth definitely thinks about that golden apple.
Mm-hmm.
But like golden apples are a big thing in like German
Folklore.
uh folklore, and I think in Scandinavian folklore as well, especially around Christmas time.
Mm.
And they don't seem to have a lot of cross pollination with like the golden apples of Eris. Um, they're different golden apples.
Oh,
So
I have to admit that my half Jewish, half Irish uh white ass boy mind immediately thought of Snow White when their apple showed up. So my
yeah,
brain went right to poison apple. So yeah.
so we get apple when I was growing up, we got apples in my stocking, and oranges.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have golden apples on our Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
Um Norwegian tradition. And that was like having like gilt apples
Mm-hmm.
was a thing in like the like Black Forest area of Germany, and also apparently like some parts of Norway. So when I saw that as like being from a Swedish area movie, I was like, is this a thing?
I mean, yeah, it might be.
Are you referencing something that I don't know in your
Yeah.
culture that like got lost in a boat in my past? I don't know.
Your parents never told
Other
stories about
golden apples.
giant floating heads.
Ah, who knows? No. Uh look, none of my bloodline talks about its past.
No,
We're
no.
all criminals.
Yeah, yeah. So back to my complaints. uh
I'm just talking shit now. Let's
yeah.
go.
So yeah, like so going back to the fact that it feels like it's for preschoolers, it kind of has the vibe. Something I think is admirable is it does the first half has the vibe of a story that your mom's reading you while you're in bed. It has
Yeah.
its stakes are that low, and it's making and unfortunately that means it makes you really sleepy. It about halfway through becomes a little bit more of a Hobbit adventure, and there's actual production design and special effects and stuff, and Christopher Lee shows up. There's more going on at a certain point, but the first half is just like it reminds me of I don't remember what they're called, but we used to watch in elementary school. There was this this Canadian made series of short films based on German folklore, and I don't remember what they were called, but it has the production value of one of those, where it doesn't look bad, but it really feels like the made for TV equivalent to a Hollywood movie. And the thing that just drove me crazy is that as soon as he gets to the Land of Faraway, everything is great. His dad is there and is king and loves him and missed him. No explanation as to why he, I kept on waiting for the other shoe to drop. His dad's lying to him about something because everybody's being really secretive, and it turns
Oh
out
yeah.
I'm like, oh, so bad shit. Another shoe's gonna drop. No, the only reason they're being secretive is they know that Mio has to go kill this wizard. That's it. That's their secret. There's no like, oh, the wizard's your real dad, or your dad was actually a war criminal, and the reason that things are the way they are is because he did something wrong. I just kept on waiting, but no, his dad's no reason for him to be there. He knows how to ride a horse right off the bat. His best friend gets to be there the second he asks for him. I thought it was funny that he was his dad's gardener. It was another like Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
adjacent thing that happened. Yeah, just nothing happens that is of any consequence for at least half the movie.
Yeah, it's pretty dull.
But that's good for preschoolers. Wait, awesome
It's
preschoolers.
fine. It's great for preschoolers. and I'm 40.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
The,
But
I was gonna say the thing that made me laugh is that they say there's an evil wizard. His name is Kato, and he's like, what does this have to do with anything? And like 2 minutes later he's like, God, I hate that evil wizard I just learned about 2 minutes ago. I've hated him my whole life. And that was like another thing that made me said, oh, there's something in the air. It's like there's a Wizard of Oz thing where you start to hallucinate or something, like bad vibes are in the air making you feel like crap. But no.
no, no, he's just a preschooler.
Yeah, he's just a boy.
He's just a boy. And then, so we get through all this, and like nothing of consequence happens. And then the very end of the movie. Should we talk about this now?
Yeah, and so yeah, we can spoil this because the problem that I had with is there's no reason for him to go back. And most of these stories, there's a reason to go back to the real world, and that's the whole arc
Yeah,
of the story.
the whole point is like something happens, you go back, the aunt and uncle miss you.
They've been looking for you everywhere. They called the police.
Like, think of the classic Wizard of Oz where
Yeah.
like Auntie M and Uncle Ben, it's not Uncle Ben.
Yeah, but we'll just say that for now. That's funny
Yeah,
that way.
we're looking for you. They would miss you. It's all this whole thing. You've been trying to get back to them the whole time. It's blah blah blah. And then you do, and you were there, and you were there, and
Yeah.
you were there, and your life's so great, and all this. No, Mio's fine with doing this. And at the end, he says the most out of pocket thing, which is, I might even be back on that bench.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And you're like, oh, he's dead.
Yeah, he just went outside and fell asleep and died on a bench of the cold or whatever.
Yeah, like,
and I hate it when people say, oh, that story was really like he was dead at the end and this was all his dream. And it's a stupid thing, an annoying thing to say about stories. But in this case, I think it's the only thing you could say about it.
Because like the main character said it.
Yeah.
Like the main character just went, and it doesn't even matter if I died.
Because I'm happy now.
I'm happy, so don't think about it anymore.
Don't
think about how I'm dead.
There's even a point where he and Christopher Lee are like having a conversation like, well, now you have to kill me. And there's this sort of, well, maybe I don't. No, I do. And he just kills him. It's like, they have a conversation about how there'll always be another evil wizard and there'll always be another knight. And so it's like a whole conversation about the futility of war. But never mind. Let's just go on with it. And he's like, and then if that wizard ever comes back, I'm gonna fucking kill him again, stab him right in the heart. And it's just, it's comedically weird to me. And again, preschoolers, you don't want to have to, like, you're giving them too much to think about.
I think we have to move on because we're just going to talk about how bad it is.
So it doesn't work. It is handsomely made at some points. There are some cool sets, and the cast is good. And more power to. It doesn't look mega cheap. It just looks a little off. But
yeah, I do just think that it is a movie for a different age than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that the people who like it love it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But man, woof.
There's all sorts of stuff I go back that I loved as a kid that it's just like, okay, this is not for me anymore. And I think that's healthy. And it's also healthy to recognize that you can like things at different ages. But so my last thing about this is that it has a really schmaltzy orchestral score.
Yeah.
And then a really schmaltzy sort of, again, ethereal theme song that is called Mio My Mio, that is super popular, and it is by the band Gemini. And Gemini is made up of the two songwriters from ABBA, Benny Donderson and Bjorn Ulvaeus. Oh, you think I'm bad at some languages. I'm really bad at Swedish. But yeah, two of the founding songwriters of ABBA wrote part of the score and this theme song, which is funny because we watched this on YouTube. And when I didn't save my link. I found it on YouTube. It's actually like 8 versions in different languages on YouTube because it's never gone on it. I think there's a DVD that's out of print. It's mostly hard to find, and so everybody has uploaded it in different languages. But if you put in Mio Mi Mio, you get a whole bunch of versions of the song, music videos, other artists that cover it. I found something that was, to me, looked like The Voice, but with a chorus instead of a single singer, where the whole chorus does this song, and it has like the call in to vote for them thing in the corner and stuff like that. And unfortunately, I actually have come around very recently on ABBA. I used to hate ABBA. Very recently, within the past year, I got ABBA's greatest hits, and I'm like, okay, I kind of get it now. And there's no ABBA in this music. I hate to tell people there's zero funk in any or rock in any of the things that happens, unfortunately.
No, I would not have. I would. So when I was in high school, in my math class, my math teacher would play music, but the only CD he had was ABBA Gold. So I exclusively listened to ABBA for 1/4 of my senior year. So
So
I'm
either
not
you
going to
love
say
it or
that
you hate it. There's
I
only
I really enjoy ABBA, but
yeah,
it does mean that I'm like, "Oh, I know that's ABBA."
yeah.
And I did not hear any from this.
Well, and it's funny because that to me, it like this movie is in a bunch of people's minds. It was not part of my zeitgeist, but it is from the author of Pippi Longstocking and from the musicians in ABBA, which I feel like next to Ingmar Bergman are Sweden's two biggest cultural
Yeah.
exploits. I can't think of anything other than those three things that when I think Sweden, I think Ingmar Bergman, Pippi Longstocking, ABBA. Maybe Ace of Base, but then I think Ace of Base, they're just the newer ABBA. So
Yeah.
anyway.
I also think of salty black licorice.
Oh yeah, disgusting candy. That's the other thing I think of. I don't know if I have any Swedish listeners. I hate your candy. I'm so sorry. You're
I
great. I have friends who live there. Great, seems like a great place. Your candy is fucking gross. It's so nasty. Bleh.
I have a huge bag of it right next to me.
Blah. Bleh.
Uh,
Okay, so let's move on. We're getting in the weeds here. So then we picked the least popular Studio Ghibli movie that fits in here, and that is 2002's The Cat Returns, and this is directed by Hiroyuki Morita. Sorry, not Moriata. Morita, and this is the only thing he ever lead directed. But he does have a long career as a storyboarder and a TV director and assistant director. Um, we're not going to go into it much here, but he recently had a sort of canceling moment. So he's a bit of an asshole. And it is kind of funny that he made this. He didn't write it, but it's kind of funny in retrospect that the guy who made this movie is a bit of a misogynist. But anyway, it was written by Miyazaki, based on a shoujo manga called Baron the Cat by Aoi Hiragi. It's sort of a spin-off of Whisper of the Heart, which is a more popular Ghibli film that has a fantasy sequence but is not a portal fantasy otherwise, where the Baron Cat does show up during that sequence. And Miyazaki wanted to make a whole movie around the cat himself and his world. And it was also based on another comic by Hiiragi. And so it's not a sequel. It's an expansion of an aspect of the story that is otherwise completely different, is the way to describe it. And this is pretty clearly one of Ghibli's cheaper movies. The animation is they don't do shading passes. It's simpler. They're kind of blobby shapes when they're further away from camera, but I think it's fine because there's so much character in the animation that you don't care if it doesn't look as stunning as Princess Mononoke.
There are cats
Yes, there are a lot of
that
cats in this film.
no, there are the cats specifically that are Secret Service agents
Yes, the best thing in the
are
whole
the
movie.
best. Oh
Like
my god.
like I honestly started to look and see, because I had seen this movie before and I forgot about them until they showed up, and then I was like, do they sell these? Do they have little toy versions of these little Secret Service cats I
Oh my
can
god,
pick
the
up at a
Secret
store?
Service cats. I want one so much. They so for any of you who don't know this movie, because I hadn't seen it. Um it's there it's this high school girl who's a bit of a misfit in shoujo manga. She rescues a cat who ends up being able to talk, and then these talking cats are like, we're gonna shower you with gifts. But
Yeah.
they show up in her house in the middle of the night, and they come in a cat parade.
Yeah.
And one of them is the king of cats, and he has bodyguard cats that have little tuxedos on.
Yeah. That are their fur is a tuxedo. Yes.
Yeah, but they're like the Secret Service, and
Yep.
then they like
They're holding their
huck
ears.
people. They do the little like,
Yeah, regular
yes,
cats
Mr.
are not
President.
happy, and so
Yeah.
they have to huck all the regular cats into the bushes.
Yeah. So you can tell the cats that are like special cats
Yeah.
because they walk up on their hind legs,
Yeah.
like people. And they also talk, but they only talk to people who can understand them.
Yeah.
Um, and they also, it's weird. Anyway, so our main character can like understand these special cats, and they're like, cool, you don't like the presents we've given you, so how about we marry you to our prince? Sounds great, we'll come pick you up at midnight, bye. It's great. But the Secret Service cats are by far the best animated of those.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of other ones which are fun, but
Well, this one is very Alice in Wonderland. Probably more Alice in Wonderland than like it's almost to the point where it's like a spoof of Alice in Wonderland at some points, because it's so close to the chasing the black cat is the, or gray cat, I guess, is the white rabbit. The way she deals with the problems, her age, she's a little older than Alice, but that's similar kind of stuff. She's like, it's like the teenager version of Alice in Wonderland, the teenage Japanese 2000s version of Alice in Wonderland. But I also thought there was a lot of Nutcracker in this, which I hadn't until that moment realized was sort of a Portal fantasy, where when they take her to their land, the land of the cats, they try to amuse her at court, and there's all these displays that it reminded me of all the separate ballets in the Nutcracker's realm. And then
yeah, the whole like Clara with the Rat King kind of
yeah,
thing, and being rescued like a damsel in distress kind of thing.
and she's, because
Whether
she's a teenager, she has sort of like, she offers commentary on all these sort of like damsel in distress things, like she's uncomfortable with it, but she's also just young enough that she doesn't, a couple times she just doesn't get the seriousness of what is being done, where she'll say maybe it would be okay to be married to a cat, maybe it's not the end of the world, and then she'll go, oh shit, no, this would actually be awful, and I'm starting to understand the ramifications. I really like that about this movie, that she's just not quite old enough. Her brain hasn't developed enough to have that sort of critical thought. She can still sort of be like impulsive about the way she's like, maybe I don't want to go back home. And there's nothing wrong with her mom. Her mom's a perfectly nice woman. She's just busy all the time. But there's just a little part of her that just isn't thinking critically about the situation, which I really like.
well, it it compares very well to Labyrinth.
Yes, and that was the
Um,
next one I was going to bring up. Yeah, absolutely.
with like Labyrinth, and the ballroom scene in Labyrinth, where like Labyrinth protagonist, is it Jessica? Is it
No,
uh
it's I'm pretty sure she's just
Jennifer?
Jennifer. Yeah, I think
Is
she
it
has Jennifer
Jennifer?
Connelly's real name.
Um yeah, Jenny maybe. Um
Sarah. Sorry, it's Sarah.
Sarah. Okay. I was like, I didn't think it was anyway. Sarah dances with the Goblin King, and like entertains the idea of staying with the Goblin King kind of thing. But she hasn't knighted, basically, any of her retinue to rescue her. But, like, there are quest stories in which you raise one of your party members to be the person who rescues you in that moment. Part of the reason that, like, a Portal Fantasy movie doesn't always have this is merely time. A lot of the stuff that we're watching can't do this just because it's usually a singular person doing a very simple quest. And a lot of Portal Fantasy stuff, a lot of Portal Fantasy fiction tends to be books for a reason. It allows you to have a little bit more time to explore.
Yeah, like little adventures, little side plots that don't
Yeah.
necessarily matter to the super plot, but yeah, that's what you want out of a story like that.
Yeah. So, like, and that's, I think, where the isekai genre as a whole, like, wanders a bit more, because in things like, and this is a title I'm making up, but only kind of, oh no, I just turned into the slime princess, which is almost the title of one of them. The idea of, like, falling into a world, you get into all these problems, but then you get part of the way into it, and you've met friends along the way, and you get to the idea of just letting your problems win. But you've made friends along the way, and you've told them that you don't want your problems to win, and then they come in and say, friendo, please don't let the depression win. And then they help you along the way. And that is a trope of Portal Fantasy, a trope of adventure fantasy. The friends you made along the way are actually how you survive.
And I think that that's actually a key difference between Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland. Is Alice is in the original story, at least, she's mostly alone, and people are not helpful, whereas Wizard of Oz is about, like, gathering your dungeon raiding party, basically, of misfit weirdos, and then helping them, and in the process of helping them, you help yourself. And there's a little bit of that in Cat Returns, but there's also a little bit of
there's a lot of that in The Cat Returns. She helps, Baron von Cat and Fatty, and
what is his
name.
Toto is his name. Muda. Sorry, Toto's
Muda.
the crow.
He's
voiced by.
I mean,
No, go on.
the
Sorry.
crow is also, she makes friends with the crow,
Yeah,
and
and
the
he
crow
helps
comes
save
back.
and the Baron.
Yeah. She definitely makes friends, and then they come back. But yeah, Wizard of Oz, I think whether your Portal Fantasy is a fairy tale Portal Fantasy, which is all about the friends you made along the way, or is a cautionary tale Portal Fantasy, which
morality
is
tale,
which is a warning against being rude to people, which is also another kind of fairy tale, but much more of a I almost want to say American exceptionalism, but like Calvinist exceptionalism, where your hard work is going to get you through it, which is kind of what I think of as, like, Alice in Wonderland.
And Spirited Away too, actually. Spirited Away is about getting a job and becoming a better person, if you want to really break it down and be kind of mean about it.
Absolutely not. I will disagree with you heartily.
Okay, good. Because I love that movie, and I don't want that to be the truth.
Sen only succeeds when she helps others.
Yeah, that's a good point.
She only succeeds.
She overcomes all these impossible trials because she's trying to help people genuinely.
Yes, when she genuinely helps people, like when she helps the river spirit, listens to what he needs, and, like, actually helps with, like, his actual needs, and cleanses like his
His
actual
goo.
spirit. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like the temple shrine of the bathhouse isn't about hard work, because and it you know it's not about hard work because the older sister character does really well there, and she is quote unquote the laziest person you've ever met.
Yeah.
It's all about knowing what the people who are there to recuperate need. And that is about listening and actually providing the service. And if you're just quote unquote hardworking, that isn't about creating that community and like giving the people the recuperation. It is
Right.
about creating that community. And the more and more that you selfishly take, that's when you become the greedy mouth person, and you just create more and more strife. No, I will fucking
Good.
fight somebody about Spirited Away.
Well, no, I mean
It
it's one of my all-time favorite movies, and so
it's
I
all about healing.
the thing in the back of my head is the story where they asked, and I don't remember his name, but the other Ghibli director who did so many movies, and they asked him about Grave of the Fireflies and about how it was this anti-war picture, and he was like, "No, it's about how my generation was was better than your generation." And it's like people were so shocked, and like I don't even know if he meant it the way he said it, but it was such like a it was about how my generation wasn't lazy like yours, and we did our own thing, and it was just so off the rails and strange when he said it. Anyway, um,
I mean, the other thing is, and this is gonna be mean, people who make the art are sometimes very wrong
yes,
about what it means to people.
yeah. And I think what well the if we're gonna go on that, the famous one of those is Fahrenheit 451, where in some interviews later in life, when he became more conservative, Bradbury tried to say it wasn't a book about censorship, and it was just like no, it's his his he decided that oh my I don't want to be known for the book about censorship. I don't know what the reasoning was behind it, but I don't think that that was true. I think that his personal uh politics changed, and so he changed what he said. In I mean, God, we don't want to look into what who wrote Ender's Game. What, I can't remember his name. It's like
Orson Scott
oh, so
Card.
Scott Card. That book is like I read Ender's Game, and I'm like, and I read it as an adult. I'm like, oh, this is like really hardcore anti-war. And then I looked into him, and this was during the Iraq War, and I'm like, well, something changed there. So so maybe maybe the creator was right the first time and totally changed their minds is the other problem that happens.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
anyway, the thing that this movie does, that Labyrinth does, that you pointed out Little Monsters does, and sort of Pinocchio does, is that there's a sort of ticking clock. She needs to leave this place or she will be trapped there forever, because she literally starts to turn into a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that happens in Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz. There's a chance that they'll be stuck there forever, but there's no like, if a certain amount of time goes by, they will definitely be stuck there forever. And I think that that helps really propel this particular movie, and they do a good job of balancing that being a serious issue with it also being kind of funny.
Yes. I think that the Beauty and the Beast problem of like knowing that there's a time limit on things before you change, before the magic goes away,
Mm-hmm.
before like puberty.
Right.
If we want to keep bringing it back to that puberty, well, I think especially with kids stories, we all know that there's only so much time to be a
Mm-hmm.
kid, and anything that heightens that makes it more interesting, more like gives it more peril, and especially like it turns it into a fairy story without putting fairies in it, but like we all know the like you have to get out of here before midnight, Cinderella,
Mm-hmm. Right.
or the magic's gone forever. Or you're gonna be a kitty. You're gonna be a kitty with kitty ears.
Yeah.
It's the worst punishment ever.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, she has to actually like in Labyrinth. If you can leave, and then your baby brother will just become a goblin, and that's like, well, maybe that's not the end of the world. Where she's like, you have to leave, or you'll become a cat, and for a while, she's like, well, maybe that's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe that's not so bad.
there has to be a ticking clock, but at the same time, the character has to make the choice to do the thing. And I think that this does. I mean, this is a very fast paced movie. This is like it's barely, it is feature length, but it's pretty short. The other thing I really enjoy is that the Land of Cats is actually just one of two things she does. There's a whole thing where she visits the Cat Bureau, which is an unrelated place where it's like a tiny village basically, where works of art live. And the idea is that if they're mostly sculptures, but they're not all sculptures, but if something is made with enough love, it has a soul, and it could exist in this land. And that is what Baron Cat is that he is a statue of a cat with a soul. And that is a very Japanese type thing. They're basically yokai creatures, like where everything has a soul, and when you're not looking, it comes to life and does stuff. I really like that part of the story, and it makes it so that the Cat Baron, it makes it overly complicated, but it makes it so the Cat Baron is actually an outsider to the cat realm. He is not one of those. He's a completely different kind of creature, and it also makes it. He is like the Nutcracker Prince in that he is the one who's rescuing her, but he's also the one that she's kind of like a little bit into, which is kind of cute, I think.
It is. It's actually adorable. She's like, I think I have a bit of a crush on you.
And
And
he's
he's like,
cool.
okay.
I mean, we watched the English dub, and I found out. I don't know if I even told you this. That basically doesn't exist anymore because it was Disney, and it's only on the Disney Blu-ray, and now other companies own it. So there's a pretty
I
good
mean,
English dub that now people can't hear if they don't own that disc, apparently. Where Carrie
yeah,
Elwes is the Baron's voice, and he's so good at it.
yeah, he's very good. You were you had posited that
Yeah.
you
Okay.
weren't sure when we were talking about it, but
Yeah.
I'm not surprised because, man,
Yeah. Like,
rights. Am I right?
yeah, completely. Like Warner Brothers Discovery has the streaming rights, and then Shout Factory has the disc rights, and neither of them could. They bought some of the English dubs, but yeah, they probably went, yeah, this isn't worth the however many thousands of dollars we have to spend on it. But yeah, it's a good dub, and it's kind of too bad that more people won't hear it. Peter Boyle is the big fat cat. Anne Hathaway is Haru, the heroine. My only other note here is that,
Tim Curry
oh
is
yeah,
the
Tim
king of
Curry is the
cats.
Cat King, and he doesn't have very many lines, but he's just like, yeah,
But it's
hey,
like,
hey babe,
hey babe, hey babe, let's get married.
yeah,
He's so silly. It's
yeah.
great.
But the other note I have here is that there is a really heavy-handed ending where they pretty much drill home that the whole metaphor is about adulthood, because when she returns from the Catland, the way we know that she has become an adult, there's two things that happen. One is she wakes up earlier than her mother and is reading the newspaper. And the other is she's walking with her friend on the way to school, and they have to stop so some ladies with baby buggies cross in front of them, and she has this sort of pleasant look on her face when she sees the babies. It's
Oh,
just,
and her friend is like, the guy you had a crush on broke up with
oh,
his
that's right.
girlfriend.
Yeah,
And she's like, I'm above such petty things now.
I'm in love with the cat
I'm in love
statue.
with a cat statue.
Yeah,
I my heart is filled with porcelain now
yeah.
and kitty thoughts. Nyan.
Anyway,
Anyway, it's
very
very
fun
silly.
movie. I really do enjoy it.
It was really good.
So, all right, and then so the last movie we watched is, I was trying really hard to do something from another country again. I realized we didn't do a single American movie this time, which is, I didn't do that on purpose, but that's kind of neat. I found something that neither of us had seen called On the Count of Zero. It's a Turkish movie. I'm not going to even attempt its Turkish name. And unfortunately, I have to attempt the name of the director. Gokhan Yorgancigil. Yorgancigil. We're going to say it's Gokhan Yorgancigil. It's probably way wrong, so I'm just going to refer to him as the director from here on out. But this one was the biggest chance that, like, I had no idea this might not have fit our theme at all. And in the end, it kind of doesn't. But it was still kind of an interesting variation on themes. It was another one I found by just doing a web search for movies about all the other dimensions and stuff.
I mean, it was something.
We knew nothing going into it, and we knew not much more coming out of it. But this is a movie about a woman who loses her favorite professor's book, and she goes to a psychiatrist who hypnotizes her, and she uses that information to try to find who stole the book, and keeps going into the hypnotism realm where there is a sort of, we aren't sure if he's a villain or a good guy, who is sort of stalking her in this realm and talking to her and also narrating the whole movie. Meanwhile, we keep getting these flashbacks to a little boy being read this Arabic fable about a boy a boy and a snake, and that part is animated, and it's kind of like it's not a very expensive movie, but the animation is nice, and it kept on making me think I was going to like the movie more because I was enjoying the animated sequences. But this movie really, really, really likes old philosophical platitudes. And it is not a very reliable source of psychiatric information. This was 2007, and things have changed in that time, but this isn't just like the wrong phrasing where they're saying autism when they mean spectrum. Like, it's just nonsense and wrong. And it makes me worry that Turkish psychiatry was actually this bad in the mid 2000s.
Oh no, they make movies like this in English.
Yeah,
Gabe.
yeah.
Gabe, they do this. They do this in movies all the time in every language. But this also is bad.
Mm.
This is very bad. This was bad.
The funny thing about it is how low stakes the initial problem is that she lost this book.
Yeah, we all, but also we all, were like, do we think that in an initial draft that they weren't looking for a book at first? Because she loses this book. She's an artist. And
she's an artist who is very tortured, and
a very tortured artist. So there are two main girls. One is a student and one is this artist. And the artist loses this book of her professor, and the artist gets hypnotized, and we're like, under her hypnosis she loses the book, and in her hypnosis like goes through a guided hypnotism and like sees things. And when she went through the hypnosis, we're like, do we think that in a earlier version of the script she witnessed a murder?
Yeah, because it plays out like a murder, like a magical realist murder mystery, basically. It's what it, because every single thing that happens, the music is like, oh, she sees who took. Also, the hypnotism makes no sense because she can like walk outside of herself and see the world around. But there'll be like this musical cue will be like, and then that's where you left the book, was in that phone booth, and the music will go dun dun. You're like, Jesus Christ. It's just a fucking book, and the book isn't even magical in itself. I kept on thinking, oh, the book's going to be magic. That's what it is. This is super important because it's going to, no.
Or like the book is going to have some more significance than it did, and like the book barely had any significance. It was like,
I'm not even sure if it was a book that had the story that the boy is being told. I mean, that's what I assumed, but
Like I have to assume that.
you
You
have to,
have to
or
assume
else
that.
what's happening?
Because like the book the book was illustrated stories of Scheherazade, but
Yeah.
like that wasn't the stories that were being told, but like there were anyway. um the original teacher was like, these are stories of Scheherazade, but those weren't the Persian stories that were
Yeah.
being told.
Yeah.
However, like that's just bad writing, and we can forgive a little bad writing or like bad translating, because people are like, you
Yeah, that could
won't
be a
know
problem.
these Persian stories, so we'll just say Scheherazade because everybody knows who Scheherazade is.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's the psychiatric student, the person who's
Her
hypnotized,
her
and
like
then
best friend. Yeah.
her best friend, and then there's this doctor, and the doctor is the one who like says this the most like medically unfounded bullshit about like, I can make people see outside their own body because they've had a psychic break and they have a split personality that is in their head that I can pull out with hypnotism, and now they can go walking around and it murders.
And it's like another thing, like there might have been a murder mystery. Well, there also might have been a version of this story that was it was more about the science of what he's doing and that he's discovering something, because there is a really long conversation when we're introduced to him about this thing he's doing, and it makes it seem like it's going to be more important, but then it's sort of incidental.
Not, and then like they kind of pop back and forth in time about when they're doing the hypnotism and who they're doing the hypnotism to.
And
And
that I think is a 2007 problem, and this is going to be my soapbox for this episode. I think that the TV show Lost ruined writing for a while, and it's still kind of a problem, where everybody decided they had to tell all their plots in this mystery box bullshit, and everything is out of order, and because we want to keep hiding things from each other. This has a halfway decent twist that you see coming, but it's still an okay twist. uh, but the way that they try to hide the twist makes you resent it when it's like, yeah, we get it, I fucking get it, just tell us, just reveal this shit. And I blame the TV show Lost. I think that ruined everybody for a period of time, where we had to do all the way we write these things. Yeah. It and part of the thing is that when I watched the trailer and read about this movie, I thought it was going to be more of a nebulous art film, but it's really just a dirty plot is what it comes down to. And
yeah, I don't disagree that Lost ruined everything.
yeah, I
Um
mean, it's really not related to what we're talking to here, but that is like, in
no.
my mind,
I
that
mean,
period of time, like 2003 to 2010, there was just all this stuff that was unnecessarily convoluted, when it would just tell a story, or just don't tell a story, make it an abstract thematic thing, but don't try to hide all of your tricks, it was, yeah, bothers me.
well, and uh the the worst thing is, so we have some like flashback from the doctor who is like, and this is the thing that I was going to, this is the study that I was trying to do, and yes, I talked to this woman who had this thing, but also I was trying to discover this. And then we have this mystery person, and this
Hmm.
is the like part of the like, oh, what's going on, who is this man who we find out who it is later, and it's this like weird personality who refers to like the doctor
Hmm.
as like with a funny name, and I could look it up but I'm not going to,
No.
and is like, and this is the doctor who is at the heart of the whole thing, and he's the one who discovered me. And this is also when we're like, did he murder someone? No, it's just a book.
Yeah.
And like when we find the lady who got hypnotized in the first place, we can't figure out why she's being hypnotized. They spend so long like working up to the hypnotism. We don't know why she's going under hypnosis. First, they won't just spit it out. They won't spit out that she's missing an object, but like they finally are like she has trauma-based amnesia based on her worry about this book missing
Mhm.
because she can't remember the incident of forgetting a book. And we're like, okay, there must have been some terrible thing that happened. No, she just forgot the bag.
Yeah, I mean, she's like very distraught. Like, I mean, she's like distraught to the point where like,
Nothing ever happens.
yeah,
Like, and that's like the whole, it was just a whole nothing burger. Like, we ate the entire movie and we looked at the buns in the middle and we're like, everything fell out. And like, you get to the end and you find out that like she had some repressed personality attached to her for some reason.
yeah, it was like, yeah, it
And
yeah,
then finally at the end, like it all coalesces into her reading a story to the guy and his mother, and everything just fell into place. It just really was muddled for no reason.
it is funny. The things that I think I would have liked about it, the reading of the story, the this child having this traumatic event that then leads to something later on in life. It reminded me of Paper House and Pan's Labyrinth, which are just both better movies that actually have children at there. And I think making them adults became a problem. And I think trying to make it into a thriller really became a problem. I'm going to read this thing from this is the Turkish language Wikipedia as Google has translated it. So there's something missing here. But the way it's described, it says, On the Count of Zero is the first Turkish film in the mystery slash thriller genre. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm pretty sure that's not true. But anyway, the film project was developed through the blog page macum.net, which makes it the first film project to be developed online with the participation of macum.net's followers on topics ranging from story ideas to casting decisions. So maybe that's why, but it seems like it was written on web forums. And I don't, that's all the information I have in English, and I don't know if that's what that means, but if that's true, that kind of makes sense. It makes everything that's weird and doesn't work about this movie make more sense. Is that it was written by a group of people over a long period of time who didn't have a theme or end goal in sight other than the twist. That was like the one thing they had. And if you stuck to that, it would make maybe a half decent short, like a 30-minute episode of something about someone who solves a mystery by being hypnotized for, maybe make her relaxed about the hypnotism, like, yeah, just yeah, hypnotize me, maybe I can find the book, instead of being like, I'm gonna die and the worst shit ever is going on because I lost the book. It's just weird. It's just very
Yeah,
strange.
it just doesn't hold together, and it's it's not, again, it is not terrible. It
It's
just
kind of,
never
well,
quite.
the visually, and given I'm sure major budget limitations, it's visually interesting, and it has that very mid 2000s overly um digitally color timed look, which would have looked really cool it looks dated now, but at the time that would have been super modern. When she's like in the most of the movies, this sort of steely, cool looking thing, and it's like perpetual night. And then when she's in the hypnotism realm, it's all sepia and kind of blurry. And uh it's sort of, actually, it sort of reminded me of the way the memories in Minority Report go. I could see them watching Minority Report and saying, oh, we want to kind of make it look like Minority Report. it's just sort of things happening. And so yeah, I'm trying to think of something nice to say. And I don't know of any of this director's other stuff. He didn't make a lot of other stuff. I could see with a good script this same director making a decent thriller, or a decent small scale drama or something. It just, this wasn't it. And it sort of fit the edict of a Portal drama. I was a little bit excited that it was actually going to be adults in a fairy tale realm, but that's not really what happens. It's just that in the hypnotism realm, fairy tale things can occur because this person with a affinity to fairy tales has some sort of control over it. Is the That's what I got.
Yeah.
That's really all I have written down. That I didn't make a
Nothing.
lot of notes on this one, just
I
because.
think that's probably all we
Yeah,
need. It it
I would be really curious to have know more about the backstory, because like that one little tidbit on Wikipedia is really weird, and
yeah,
to have that verified would be kind of interesting, but I don't know.
like knowing exactly like how it was written by committee, if it was like actually written by committee,
That seems
or if
crazy.
like
Or if they just had
yeah,
ideas and then he wrote an actual script. Like, he's credited as a screenwriter too.
that's that's wild, man.
Yeah.
Like the idea of
Yeah, I mean,
look,
it's dumb for me to do these in release order, because it means we ended on the one that sort of flabbergasted us and didn't really work. But oh well,
eh,
that happens sometimes.
it does. Like
And we,
it's
we
fine.
could have just not. But we took it took an hour and a half of our lives to try to figure out what was going on in this movie. So it seemed like
Yeah, why not?
we had to cover it.
Yeah, look, it's fine.
Yeah.
So they can't all be winners,
No.
and you know,
And that, that's the risk you run when you're I really do want to try to make this show be not just American movies. And so that's the risk I run, is that I run into something that probably doesn't work no matter what language you speak, is my
yeah,
guess.
and it was fine.
Yeah.
Like, look, we can be very confused about exactly how confused they were, um, on what hypnotism actually can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, anyway,
Or what good it even
I
does
I know,
for mentally ill
goodness.
people, because it does do good for mentally ill people. It just that's losing a book isn't make you mentally ill.
No, and you don't get surround video.
No. And
Anyway,
past life experiences and the dissociative identity disorder thing just comes out of nowhere and then is dropped as well, which really feels like somebody on a message board going, and then we find out that she has dissociative identity disorder.
yeah, and
Awesome.
we'll definitely be able to portray that sympathetically
Yeah.
in our quasi horror movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Well, if anybody's looking for good Portal books, I highly recommend Seanan McGuire's Wayward Children series. They're short. Um, they are like young adult books. They're slightly, I would say, horror adjacent. But she has been writing a very good series of dark portal fantasy for the last 7 or 8 years. They're Hugo Award winning.
Oh,
Um,
no. La-ti-da.
and yeah, la di da. I can hook you up with them, Gabe, if you want. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna try to recommend. I don't read a lot of fantasy,
I mean,
and
I
I think we've
definitely
covered
there's
every movie I would have wanted to cover. I think we've at least mentioned them all. So
yeah, probably.
it's a cool thing. It's a cool thing. It doesn't always work out, but it's a really cool thing, and it's really neat how I almost always like it. Like,
I do like I love a good going like stranger in a strange land type thing.
hmm
I love a protagonist going into a place where they're a stranger and trying to do their best. Like there are a lot of things you can sell as a portal fantasy, like Farscape. Even though that's not my favorite show. I love the Muppets, but the acting gets to me. But like, I love a fish out of water story and doing your best. I feel like video games do it really well, though, because it gives you as a protagonist like a really good framing device. So I did not prepare one, so I'm not gonna list a list of those off. I just wanted to give my girl Shauna McGuire a good shout out there because I really like those books.
Okay.
Anyway,
are you and Blake still doing your thing? Are you counting? We can.
No, we're still probably pretty firmly on hiatus for a while. We were hoping to come back to do the most recent season of Clone High, but between life being life and time being what it is, we have not gotten down to record anymore. Other than that, I'm just doing some writing, but none of it's published. So
okay,
I'm mostly just on your podcast now.
Okay.
So
well,
if you want to check out my archives, you can find me at yourfavoritemonsters.com. There you'll find all of my archives with me and Blake, and you can listen to a podcast about the various seasons of Scooby-Doo, the one show that we did.
Mystery Inc. was
Mystery
it?
Incorporated. Yes. I was like, oh God, I've forgotten.
It's been so many years.
It's been so long. And then also the one season of Clone High we did, which was the only season that was out when we recorded it.
Right.
And we are planning on going back to do the other, but,
Well, I, as usual, can be found on the Genre Grinder website, on the Genre Grinder Facebook page. Genre Grinder Twitter is pretty much dead now. I have locked that. I have not deleted it, but it's locked, and I will not be posting to it anymore. Instead, I am posting. I have been posting on Blue Sky for a while under Gabe Powers, and it seems like some of the studios that send me stuff to review are actually reposting my reviews now. So that is where I'm going to put things, is there, Facebook, and on the Genre Grinder Instagram page. And then I'd like to again give a special thanks to the people who have pitched in for the Patreon. And as I keep saying, it's enough money now that it's covering the cost of the website too. So I'm not doing that part out of pocket anymore. So thank you to all you people. Until next time, keep checking every closet, cupboard, and crawl space in your home for a magical portal to a world that's better than this one. Goodbye.
We'll find them someday.
Flyga mot oss natten